The Seagull Revolution is a fictitious political campaign that all my art centers around. It slowly builds upon a world where seagulls are having an uprising. Although the happenings occurring throughout the campaign do mirror our timeline, for example, the Seagull Revolution was affected by the lockdown, I try to avoid mimicking actual political events. My practice is first and foremost illuminated by my interest in the use of humour within artworks and their link to political art. In first year, I created interactive posters which were inspired by the style of Russian propaganda. Posters with the comic-style seagull asked the viewer questions or were inviting them to participate in a made-up event. My work focused on raising awareness of the Seagull Revolution campaign around the art studio and also in public spaces. Some of the art was recruiting viewers by selling or giving away artwork, such as badges, leaflets, and zines, to promote the cause. I found this to also be an invaluable technique to collect feedback about my work. It opened up the conversation between the viewer and I. Throughout the past year, I have had to reimagine my work for the indoors. This meant becoming introspective and figuring out what I wanted my role to be. My art has developed by focusing on world building and using artwork to build up installations and creating props for performance pieces. Generating rules within my practice and working across a range of medias to keep the campaign interesting and relevant to viewers. As the Seagull Revolution grew and changed, the consistent use of the colours red, black, and white kept the work easily recognisable. The simple illustration of the seagull doesn't change when being translated into different mediums. Last year, I set out to become a character within the Seagull Revolution. The hat symbolises this transition, becoming part of my art. It was the natural evolution from the performance I did in Year 1, wearing a tall papier-mâché seagull mask, whilst handing out leaflets to the public. This year, the Seagull Revolution has moved into my home for lockdown, and I am continuing to explore how to build a world that many are now unable to see in person. Building further context and refining the details of a dystopian world where the seagulls are uprising. Now I am stepping back into the voice of narration for the Seagull Revolution, trying to document it as it comes to an end. The first artist I would like to acknowledge is contemporary textiles artist Debbie Smith. At the start of semester 1, I began to think about the initial pieces that started the Seagull Revolution. My first piece was the manifesto I painted for the seagulls, and I wanted to reimagine it in a new medium. This piece turned into a longer process than I anticipated, as I optimistically took out my sewing machine. Debbie Smith's work redefines 2D and 3D pieces. The pieces are intricate and detailed despite their large scales, and they are made using thread and pins. These pins lift the thread from the wall, creating a floating 3D effect. When viewing it, depending on where you stand, the experience will be different. In an interview, Debbie Smith said this about her methods. Despite the complexity of the lengthy process, I try to capture a great feeling of energy and spontaneity, and in some cases, humour. This energy is exactly what made me gravitate towards her work. When designing my first piece, I knew I had to use materials I had on hand at home. The cotton I used is from an old bedsheet, and most of the threads I already had in my possession. The goal of this piece was to initially announce the renaming of the Seagull Revolution to the Seagull Redemption. However, with some further thought, I didn't go through with it. A lot of the decisions I made was during the sewing process itself. As it was a new way of working for me, trial and error was how I developed the piece. When I first sewed the text, I realised how restrictive the sewing machine was. The second layer in red is more playful as I allowed the machine to pull the piece in different directions. This in turn helps the piece look more spontaneous like Smith's work. I have left this piece unfinished, but will possibly return to it and have a go at embroidering a manifesto onto it by hand. This will slow down the process, but will help build visual themes such as obsession within my work. Klaus Oldenburg is another artist that has influenced my recent work. The Swedish sculptor creates large-scale depictions of everyday objects. I read an excerpt from his manifesto, where he notes that in order to imitate humanity within his work, the use of comedy and violence are necessary themes. I like to create artwork that can also be used as props in upcoming performance pieces. However, during lockdown, I've become increasingly interested in what it's like to live with my art, and how it works installed around my home. This seagull sculpture is like a children's toy in size, and is a comforting piece that I can easily move with me around the house. I wanted to create a piece which could inspire play. I sewed it by hand without following a pattern, which means some mistakes are visible. The most important part of its design was its ability to stand on its own, which meant it could be placed anywhere and become an independent entity from myself. Its simple design allows for the viewer to project their own emotions onto him. I like the fact it's a seemingly innocent piece, with the potential to be perceived as something quite evil, depending on the context of where I put him in the house. This is partly inspired by Feathers McCraw, the penguin from Nick Park's animation Wallace and Gromit. Continuing with the theme of embroidery, I researched some historical tapestries. There is a link between my work and storytelling. In crits and tutorials, it often comes up that the Seagull Revolution isn't easy to follow or understood by first-time viewers. Moving forward, I want to invest more time in world building and giving the narrative of the seagulls more context and finer details. I want my pieces to be strong enough to be seen on their own, but to also come together as one cohesive, immersive show. The Bayeux tapestry is an embroidered cloth that is 70 meters long. It presented the historical events that led to the Battle of Hastings in 1066. It has been referenced many times in popular culture and has been referred to as Britain's first comic strip. If I had the time and skills, I would have embroidered a seagull version of the tapestry. Instead, I decided to play to my skills and illustrate it instead. I really love the size of the Bayeux tapestry, and I felt that that was important to replicate. The piece I've created is about 3 meters long, and I've installed it on my living room wall. The IKEA arm dresser is there for reference. I used brown wrapping paper to ensure I'd have enough length. It was also the only thing I had on hand at the time, which is an ongoing theme to my practice during lockdown. The brown paper also stops the illustrations from looking too graphic and modern. Unlike all my previous pieces, I felt I could go into a lot of detail to encourage viewers to stand close and to follow the story. I tried to represent famous or recognizable events on the timeline. The illustrations should feel familiar and nostalgic, with the viewer hopefully being reminded of a children's storybook. There are references to ancient Greece, the Renaissance, wars, and lockdown. Some illustrations even refer back to artworks I've already done on the Seagull Revolution, but needed clarification. Such as the brief synopsis of the Seagull Wars, which should finally end the question of why I picked seagulls over pigeons. This piece represents a part of my practice I want to explore more. That is working through mark making. A lot of the detail in the illustrations are built upon trying to showcase as many mark making styles as possible. This is to keep the viewer close and interested. Here you can clearly see the one colour I added. Using a yellow Posca pen, I coloured every seagull beak and my coat. This is to show the subtle link between myself and the seagulls. The piece references the seagull's evolution from beginning and ends with the events leading to the revolution.